This is a film study look at one of the coverages that Kelvin, Sheppard, and the Detroit Lions are utilizing in obvious passing situations to help the Lions defense get off the field, give opposing teams' quarterbacks and offensive coordinators things to process post-snap in terms of consistent presentation of a too-high safety structure and what looks to be man coverage underneath. It's not always two-man from a post-snap reaction standpoint. Sometimes I do think it's predetermined. So basically, I think Kirby will drop down and Branch drop back, or vice versa, and that's determined depending on the routes that the receivers that they're facing and perhaps the formation that's presented. I want to try to bring you guys some understanding of the two-man coverage, and also so that you can have some pre-snap awareness of it basically when you watch the Lions play the Chiefs and moving forward. Hopefully it piques your interest as the video goes on, the complexity and the reasons why Sheppard is playing certain coverages packaged together with the same presentation. And then as we go through the season, perhaps Kelvin Sheppard uses more or less of it, depending on what corners are healthy, what the pass rush looks like. Right now, Detroit is 17th in the NFL in points per game allowed, but that's really after giving up 21 points in the fourth quarter to the Bengals. The game was really over, but the Bengals didn't realize that, and Detroit probably would have liked to have had a little bit more of a margin or a buffer, if you will, before the game-ending strip or a sack for a safety by Derek Barnes. Now go to Kansas City to face the Chiefs, who are searching for a win at 2-3, and their offense is heating up, scoring 65 points in the last 2 weeks. So I do want to talk about the corners and the linebackers throughout this video. Let's get the film started a little bit so you guys can understand what the two-man coverage is and why it's working so well. I think 3 plays from the game against the Ravens. I've actually talked about this particular snap multiple times. Third quarter, 3rd and 6. It's a conversion to Zay Flowers. But what does two-man look like pre-snap? Well, you've got Kirby and Brian Branch as the 2 high safeties, and you can kind of tell that it's coming. Detroit and Kelvin Sheppard, they make no bones about it. They will let you know we're playing two-man because Alex Anzalone lines up directly over the top of the tight end in what is quite obviously going to be man. Typically, Jack Campbell is soloed up on the running back. The Ravens happen to run a little bit of a pick or rub scheme, and this is very similar to what you may see with Kansas City, in that Mark Andrews, the tight end, is going to kind of hesitate a little bit and try to pick Amik Robertson. Now, the 3+1 spy is not the same, is not ubiquitous with the two-man coverage, but Kelvin Sheppard is using it for a very specific reason. Two-man does not have a low-hole dropper, so basically there's no one in the middle of the field here from a dedicated coverage standpoint. That 11th defender is one of your 2 safeties, depending on which guy's your free safety. But in any case, it's susceptible, or it can be taken advantage of by a mobile quarterback. And so the 3+1 spy, really the idea is, let's play two-man, and then let's dedicate or allocate a 4th guy, remove him from the rush component. He would be available if the quarterback was to scramble. So the 3+1 spy does a lot of things. It allows one or both of the safeties to close down now. And Branch has been the guy that's typically been doing that the most often through 5 weeks. You're right, he's got great burst, commitment, and he's a great tackler. So it uses the specific skills of your players in an expert fashion, and then takes advantage of all the inside linebackers that are on the roster that are very athletic, physical, and also really good tacklers as well. Another example from the Ravens game, and like I said, I've broken this one down multiple times as well, but it gives you an idea of what you're going to see pre-snap and what Kansas City would see and what Mahomes would have to process. This makes it very simple when you see Anzalone lined up directly over the tight end. Andrews happens to stay in block. So once again, it's Branch who's driving on an underneath route. So some of this does appear to be predetermined, meaning as soon as the ball is snapped, Kirby will roll and Branch will kind of step downhill. So really it ends up being man-free, but it's a two-man presentation pre-snap. You got the same look with the spy, in this case Derek Barnes. So 3+1 spy is not exactly the same thing. They don't use it in every iteration of two-man. Sometimes it's just a typical 4-man rush. It's a great job, if you ask me, of seeing, based on the angle that we have here, Branch go all the way across the field with that drag route from Rashad Bateman and be there to basically make the tackle, even if the throw was on target and Bateman was able to get it. Like I said, you and Mahomes will be able to see it pre-snap because Anzalone will be lined up to the tight end pretty much no matter where he goes. 3rd and 13 from the same game against the Ravens. This does not end up being two-man. How do you know, or how can I know? Well, Anzalone is not lined up over the tight end Mark Andrews. He's on the same side, but he's there to threaten a blitz. It does have a 2-high safety structure that will change post-snap. Really, I think this is basically a version of cover 3 on a 3rd and 13. So you should have 4 droppers generally in the same line. Brian Branch is dropping down to be the hook. Most people would refer to this as cover 3 buzz. Some would call it cover 3 insert. In any case, the flat defender to the top side of the field into the boundary is Derek Barnes. He's going to end up getting the sack when the spy, Alex Anzalone, is unable to corral or control Lamar Jackson initially. So many guys serve as the spy. I think the reason for that is to confuse the offensive line and or the quarterback. They don't know exactly who would serve as the spy. And so what I mean is pre-snap, and we're not going to show the whole play from the end zone angle, you got Alex Anzalone, Jack Campbell, and Derek Barnes, not in that order. Either 3 of those guys could serve as the spy. In this particular iteration of it, it was Anzalone, and Barnes and Campbell dropped out in the zone. Earlier in the season, week 2 against the Bears on a 3rd and 9, all of these are going to focus on 3rd down coverages. Of course, you've got to get the Chiefs in this situation, which means stop or slow down the run game completely, right? That's the idea. That's what Detroit's been really good at doing for the last 2 or 3 years, with a couple of games to serve as exceptions. The Bears did rush for, I think, 124 or 132 in this game. So you give a 2-man look with Kirby and Branch as the high safety defenders, and then Anzalone lined up over the tight end. It's not, however, it's actually a 6-man pressure scheme. I didn't illustrate the defensive or the nose tackle's rush path, but the idea here is that they're giving a 3-man rush look with your 3 inside linebackers, basically 3-3 personnel grouping, and then either of those guys can be the spy. Typically, Anzalone is the only one that's asked to cover a tight end man-to-man. That's what he's got here, man-to-man, but this is clearly not 2-man because you've got so many rushers trying to get to the quarterback. So just to be clear, there's less support for the DBs here. And this is one of my major contentions, or the points of contention that I want to bring up. That's a difference in what most of us think about man and what 2-man actually is. This version of man has far less help than 2-man does. There's just not as much assistance by way of the safeties. And in fact, Brian Branch is not playing safety here. He's basically playing slot corner. He is man, as opposed to being one of the 2 high safeties that could help out with an underneath route, a post, a dig, or a comeback that's between the top of the numbers and the hash. It's an incomplete pass. I just included this one to illustrate to you that every time Kelvin Sheppard lines up in this 2 high safety structure, it's not always going to be 2-man, and he's giving a complete picture to the opposing team's offense and offensive staff in terms of their preparation and trying to figure out what the coverage actually is. Same game against the Bears. This is a 3rd and 7. Clearly not a 2-high setup with Branch rolled up into the boundary. This is going to be another example of one of those 2-man blitzes. Branch and Anzalone trying to isolate or run a 2-on-1 with the running back. Of course, we know what happens here. This is the one where Branch elevates in the air, and it's Terrion Arnold's first interception that gets wiped away by a penalty. So it's a 3 deep, 2 under. Not necessarily a zone, but you're trying to just match routes, and you as a defender understand we've got 6-man pressure, so we know the ball is going to have to be out in a certain time frame. Clearly there was a defender or an offensive player tight end open in the right flats there, and then Zacchaeus run into the left flats there. But the idea is to force the quarterback to get rid of the ball quick. It's a great interception by Terrion Arnold, a great job of controlling the football, I should say, going to the ground. Unfortunately, didn't count because of the penalty on Branch. The idea here is to give the quarterback a lot to consider. Pre-snap, it looks simple. But then post-snap, Sheppard and the Lions can morph it into something else. Still ends up being a quite aggressive version, the iterations of it or the adaptations off of the initial pre-snap look. Hopefully I said that in a way that makes sense. Moving forward to week 5, it's a 3rd and 4. Running back will switch sides. You've got Anzalone lined up over the tight end. And again, 2 high safety structure. Now, it's not always going to be 2-man, and this is what was so brilliant last week, at least early on against the Bengals. You can bracket or you can double the other team's best wide receivers, and that's what they do here, basically. Jamar Chase, the outside receiver, kind of running an inside release and then deeper out towards the sideline. Higgins bringing his route back in towards the left hash. Both Branch and Kirby Joseph are going to help out their corners. I think Terrion Arnold down to the bottom and Rock Ya-Sin up to the top. So it can look like 2-man pre-snap and then morph into a heavy blitz structure like a couple of the ones I showed you against the Bears, or more of a conservative help philosophy. And in this case, it ends up being a spin back to the outside by Aiden Hutchinson to get a sack. The only sack that he had out of 3 that actually counted this past Sunday. I think it can create indecision post-snap. I'm very interested to see what the Chiefs do. If Hutchinson especially is completely healthy, I do wonder, I'm wondering now a little bit more assured with it, that he may have been sick or suffering from some type of illness, because he just didn't have the same type of energy late in the game. And here recently, he's surged in the second half against the Ravens, against the Browns. He started off with a certain level of play, good, not bad, but then by the second half was totally dominant against the guys he was facing. That dynamic did not exist this past week against the Bengals, and I think they have, a pretty weak offensive line. 3rd and 3 from the same game. Anzalone led up to the tight end. This is going to be an incomplete pass to his side. And so sometimes you're not going to get any help, and I wonder if this is going to be the matchup, one of the matchups that really determines the Detroit-Kansas City game on Sunday. So what I mean is Anzalone going up against Kelsey into the boundary, some of these kind of outbreaking routes, if you will, being available to the quarterback. Anzalone would have knowledge of that because his help is going to be to the high side in a vertical, or perhaps to the inside. Branch is helping out on Jamar Chase to the top side. Higgins on a potential vertical with Kirby Joseph, who is spying the quarterback on the throw. It's an incomplete pass on a 3rd and 3. The one thing I will say is, and I kind of suspected this the past couple of years, seeing Aaron Glenn play a similar style of defense, is I feel like Detroit, are determining for you, the offense, what's available to you. I think Anzalone makes this go. He basically is a dime linebacker in this coverage. So I can tell you this. What will happen early in the game, the first time that Detroit does this, is Tony Romo will say, well, you can't show Pat Mahomes the coverage pre-snap. I guarantee you the Detroit Lions will. Kelvin Sheppard, Dan Campbell, those guys are pretty much going to do what they do. Another iteration of this from last week, the win against the Bengals. This is late 4th quarter. It's 35-17. Now, Anzalone is lined up to the tight end, again, into the boundary. Late getting coordinated here. That's Trey Flowers, who I think had just checked into the game earlier in that possession. Late getting lined up to Chase to the top side. And so Kirby clearly orients himself to help out with Chase, independent of any of these other routes underneath. The D-line for Detroit was really tired here. And this is a traditional 4-man rush, okay? So this is different from a spy. Just so you know, Jack Campbell is on the running back in man. So when you play 2-man, you do not have a low hole dropper, an extra inside linebacker to assist with the quarterback when he tries to scramble, because that defender, depending on how you want to look at it, is manned on the running back, or he is one of the 2 safeties that is lined up in a high alignment, basically at the 3rd level of the defense. So hopefully I'm explaining to you the dichotomy and the danger/risk that there is for a quarterback, escaping out of the pocket. Everyone else is in man. And then your safeties are deep, unable to help, and in this case, the D-line is tired. Hutchinson, to me, did not look completely 100% in the second half. I have no idea what he may have been suffering from, if it was an illness or whatever. There's nothing indicated on the injury report. I don't suspect he was injured. To me, it just looked like he wasn't 100% from a cardio standpoint. Moving backwards a little bit, this says week 5 should be week 4, quite obviously, against the Browns. 3rd and 8 in the first quarter. And I wonder if the Chiefs might try some of this stuff, basically go 12 personnel or 13, and see if they can get Campbell or Barnes on one of the other tight ends. But I don't think that that's really a matchup in their favor. Both of those guys, Barnes and Campbell, are ready for those moments. They practice this coverage every single day. So this underneath route by Jerry Jeudy is going to be what Branch will drive on. Kirby is the other safety to the downside of our screen. And you can see exactly how this works out. Post-snap, Branch is hard-coded to sit in the middle of the field, and Kirby roll, to a high-side alignment. He ends up getting an interception here because I think he's just reading where Flacco is looking. This is, of course, the interception that's poorly thrown by Flacco, who apparently since been traded just as I record this. So really crazy season for him, or crazy couple of seasons. I think this was Kirby's 19th interception on the for his career, and now he has 20. Still in it should be say week 4 again. Got my weeks wrong. I guess +1 and -1 kind of fixes it or balances it out. But one high safety look changes the dynamic significantly. And so what I mean by that is you're going to get this route right here. I think it's Judy. Makes a great catch against Terrion Arnold. Basically, the safety is not as capable of helping on all of the routes that emanate because you only have one of them lined up in a deep safety alignment. In this case, it's Kirby Joseph, as opposed to two. It's really that simple. The width of the field is so much, 53 1/3 yards, that you don't have the same quickness of help from the free safety to drive on any particular route or either route, a route from either side of the field. It's a great catch, don't get me wrong. The point is, when you're in man coverage here with a one high safety look, you don't have as much support. This is obviously not two-man because Anzalone's not lined up over the tight end. That will be another thing that I would wonder about Mahomes and the Chiefs doing, is putting the tight end backside and then isolating Anzalone, putting the three receivers to the other side and trying to take advantage of Detroit's coverage that way. Flacco was initially looking to the left-hand side for the defense, the top side of our screen originally from the All-22, and then he's going to come back to this route. I apologize, I was wrong. It's not Judy that makes the diving catch. It's a brilliant job, and this is the level to which I think Kelvin Sheppard and Dan Campbell want you to have to execute in order to get yards. There's a penalty there. I think it's on Terrion Arnold. There may have been a second one. I'm not sure. That really doesn't matter to me. The idea here is that Kelvin Sheppard, Dan Campbell know what they're susceptible to based upon the coverage that they're playing. This one clearly looks like two-man. Clearly does not look like two-man pre-snap because Alex Anzalone is not lined up over here to match the tight end Mike Gesicki. You do have a two-high safety alignment, but they're going to switch or morph this to a Tampa 2 post-snap. So Jack Campbell is going to move to running between the hashes. Two flat defenders here. It's a Tampa 2. We know that this is the sack by Derek Barnes that effectively ends the game. I would wonder or hope that perhaps Sheppard and Campbell this week are going to work on running this same variation, but having Anzalone be over here on this side. So what that would basically do is, if Campbell was here and Anzalone was lined up over the tight end to make it look like two-man, Anzalone would end up running between the hashes like Campbell just did, and then Campbell would take Anzalone's drop, basically the hook drop between the top of the numbers and the hash. Hopefully I said that in a way that makes sense. Basically, you'd be flipping these two, but still retaining the ability pre-snap to show Mahomes that two-man structure by putting Anzalone to the tight end side. What can you expect Kansas City to possibly do? Here's a couple of early ideas. It's way too soon to do a preview, but first of all, the Chiefs are right-handed in critical situations. And this one certainly is. It's a 4th and 2 in the first quarter. In fact, it's their first possession. And so they rely on pick or rub or shield concepts often. It's obviously not a two-high safety alignment. There's Malachi Starks, the Ravens rookie safety. There's Kyle Hamilton. This is our dime linebacker or third or fourth corner, if you will, in Chibodi Awuzie. The concept is basically going to be a snag here by Juju to pick or rub Marlon Humphrey and refuse to allow him to get out on this quick out route on the 4th and 2. How can you defeat this? Number one, you've got to be confident in your quickness. Number two, be physical at the line. So Worthy gets off the line here and presses Humphrey backward just a little bit, and that's going to force Humphrey to go over the top of that shield, over the top of that pick route, which, yes, Juju is trying to run a route, but it's quite obvious, that he's shielding Marlon Humphrey. And then look at Mahomes already throwing the football. He knew where he was going with this ball. They're a right-handed football team when it counts. In critical situations, that's going to be one of the options that they look at. Pick, rub, or shield concepts. They do it consistently. In my opinion, they're one of the teams that really relies on it the most. Finally, 3rd and 7 from that same game. Against the Ravens on the first possession, in fact, and it's a very similar look to what the Lions are going to give that the Ravens present here. Two high safety look. The only difference is this will be Alex Anzalone lined up over the tight end, Travis Kelce. Again, it's way too early to do a preview, but I thought this play in particular might give you an idea of what Mahomes and Reed's answers might be. First of all, to the downside, run an in-cut, some type of in-breaking route. This route, doesn't go across the field like this, like some of the ones we've seen Branch defend, and basically have Branch or Joseph react to that route. Vacate that side of the field, and then sneak this route in behind him, whether it's a dig, whether it's something like is drawn up here to Juju or not. Another option to the top side, have someone look like they're going to break to the inside, perhaps draw the safety down, and then run a whip route, China out, whatever you want to call it, back to the sideline. Mahomes initially is looking to the top side. I think this is hard-coded for Kyle Hamilton to sit down in the middle of the field, but we've seen this a little bit with Branch coming down here and Kirby Joseph settling in the middle of the field deep. You can see how this works out, even though, again, it's hard-coded for Hamilton to react or step down here. This is not a reaction, to the route by Kelsey, but you get to the idea that perhaps trying to clear him out, get him to react to it, essentially give him some bait, and then throw something back in behind him. Am I saying that I think it will work? No. I think that so far it's been wildly successful for Detroit. And just any answer the Chiefs come up with isn't automatically going to work in any way, shape, or form. This is not man in the traditional sense. I want to be clear about this. This isn't a high-risk, no help, or very little help man coverage. This is a strategically supported version of man. I know it as two-man, meaning two high safeties, and then man underneath. There is no second-level low-hole dropper in coverage. He's in man on the running back. So Campbell and Sheppard know that. So when they call that, they understand the possibility of the quarterback scrambling out, like we saw Browning do this past Sunday. The 3+1 spy is meant to be a counter or maybe an answer to that. And it's clearly worked out very well. Like I said earlier, they've got 16 sacks so far without their complete starting line, D-line being available, right? No Aleem McNeil until now. He's back at practice. Davenport's been out. Hutchinson is playing extremely well, 5 sacks, could be as many as 8. I think some of the concerns about Hutchinson this past week against the Bengals are legitimate. The more you watch the film, the more to me it looks like he's absolutely gassed and worn out in the second half, and you needed some help, which runs right in line with what I said in the reaction video Sunday, that he needs some assistance and some more talent to help get some organic wins. I do think the Lions' health might influence their decisions here, but I expect Campbell and Sheppard to stick with the way they got here and not deviate from the plan in a global fashion. What they want to do is stop or slow down the run. They've been very good at it generally. I think 85 or 83 yards per game is their average allowed, and then put you in obvious passing situations, two high safety structure, play man, different versions of it. It could really come down to moments where they go 3+1 spy and Barnes or Nowaski or whoever has to try to get Mahomes to the ground. Don't go for the pump fakes, really. That's advice point number 1. Hit him. Number 2 is be aggressive as possible, even if penalties get called early, and they will. The Chiefs are going to get penalties called. Reed is going to scheme situations where they run pick or rub or shield concepts. And in any case, this is my first look at a preview of how the two-man coverage might work out between the Lions and Chiefs matchup, what Kelvin Sheppard has been getting accomplished early in 2025. I think it's been extremely successful, and I would expect him and Dan Campbell to continue relying on it even this week against the Chiefs.